High in the rainforest canopy, a chimpanzee goes into labor. She separates from the group, finds a quiet place, and within minutes, the baby arrives. She can reach down, pull her newborn close, clear its airway, and return to the forest. For a chimpanzee, birth is difficult, but it is still something her own body can handle. Humans are different. Hundreds of thousands of years ago, on the African savanna, a woman goes into labor. No surgery, no medicine. But there is something she has that the chimpanzee does not need: people around her. Because the strangest thing about human birth is not just that it is painful, it is that our own bodies make it almost impossible to do alone. In most primates, newborns usually emerge facing their mothers. The mother can reach down, pull the baby close, and immediately help it survive. But humans took a very different evolutionary path. When our ancestors began walking upright, the human pelvis changed. It became better for carrying our bodies across open landscapes. But it also created a narrow, complicated pathway for childbirth. The baby could no longer simply move straight out. It had to rotate through the birth canal. And because of that rotation, human babies are often born facing away from the mother. The person giving birth cannot simply see the child arriving, cannot easily guide it out, cannot safely solve the problem alone. The body itself created a situation where another pair of hands became almost necessary. But this was only half of the problem, because at the same time our pelvis was becoming more restricted, something else was expanding. The human brain. Our ancestors became smarter. Our babies began arriving with larger heads than almost any other animal. One evolutionary change helped us conquer the world. The other made entering the world far more difficult. Scientists call this the obstetric dilemma. Evolution had hundreds of thousands of years to redesign our bones. It never did. Because leaving this deadlock unresolved wasn't a flaw. It was the very accident that forced us to become human. The answer was not a better body. It was a different way of living. 50,000 years ago, human survival depended on something no other animal had built at this scale: a network of people who could step in when one person could not. In a small hunter-gatherer camp, a pregnant woman was never just preparing for her own child. The entire group was preparing for a new member. An older woman sits right beside her, gripping her hand. Someone else is boiling water over the fire. Someone is holding the children who are already born. Someone stands at the edge of the light, watching the dark for anything that moves. The whole camp is holding its breath for one new life. For most of human history, pregnancy was never really one woman's event. It belonged to whoever was standing close enough to help. Humans couldn't manage birth alone the way so many other animals can, so we built a workaround instead: cooperation. Anthropologists studying groups like the Hadza in Tanzania see the same pattern today. A newborn passes through far more hands than just its mothers, aunts, friends. Other women in camp all take a turn holding it, feeding it, watching it. The child doesn't belong to one person. It belongs to everyone. Here's why that matters. A fawn can walk beside its mother the same day it's born. A foal stands within minutes. A human baby can't even lift its own head. And that helplessness is not an accident. It is the price we paid for becoming human. Our brains became too large. Our bodies became too narrow. Evolution was trapped between two impossible choices: keep the baby inside longer and risk killing the mother, or send the baby into the world before it was ready. Evolution chose the second option. It pushed us out early. In biological terms, humans are almost born unfinished. Biologically, every human baby is born premature. To stay inside until our brains were fully built, a pregnancy would need to last nearly 2 years. But that would kill the mother. We were sent into the world unfinished, which left humanity with only one choice. The group had to become the womb. Cooperation kept the mother alive. But cooperation needed something else: knowledge. Every human group had someone who carried it. The woman everyone trusted when a new life was about to enter the world. Her knowledge was never written down, but humans carried it for thousands of generations. That knowledge was perhaps humanity's earliest technology. It wasn't forged in stone or tempered by fire. It lived invisibly inside a human mind, because none of it was written down. There was only one human being teaching another. Picture that older woman sitting beside the fire. She has watched birth happen again and again. In the dim firelight, she reads what others miss: the subtle shift in a mother's scream, the exact angle to turn a trapped infant, or which crushed leaves stop an infection before it starts. This knowledge was invisible, but it was powerful, and every generation depended on someone who remembered. And perhaps the strangest thing is this: humans didn't just preserve this knowledge. Evolution actually changed the human life cycle to protect the people who carried it. Anthropologists have found something unusual about our species. Human women can live for decades after reproduction ends. Almost no other mammal does this. This means something important happened during our evolution. Older women were not simply surviving after they stopped having children. They were still contributing to the survival of the next generation. One possible answer is called the grandmother hypothesis. The idea is simple. An older woman may stop creating new children, but she can dramatically increase the chance that existing children survive. She notices what a first-time mother misses. She remembers what others have forgotten. She carries lessons learned from hundreds of previous births. She is no longer producing life directly. She is protecting the knowledge that allows life to continue. Maybe human longevity was never only about living longer. Maybe it existed because every generation needed someone who could carry knowledge forward, someone who could turn one person's experience into the survival skill of an entire group. The first great human technology wasn't a tool. It was the ability to pass knowledge from one generation to the next. But that knowledge changed something deeper than the way humans gave birth. It changed the way humans saw weakness. A newborn human is one of the most helpless creatures on Earth. For a long time after birth, a baby survives only because other humans choose to spend their time, energy, and resources keeping it alive. And somewhere along the way, humans learned a strange idea. Weakness was not something to abandon. It was something worth protecting. At first, this instinct appeared around birth, but it did not stop there. Archaeologists have found evidence that this behavior spread far beyond mothers and babies. In ancient human remains, researchers discovered something surprising. People who should not have survived did. Bones with severe injuries had healed. Some individuals lived for years after losing the ability to hunt or move normally. In a world without hospitals or food storage, that creates a mystery. Someone had to bring them food. Someone had to protect them. Someone had to carry them when the group moved. These people survived because others decided they still mattered. The same instinct that made a mother's survival depend on a group became the instinct that made the group protect its weakest members. A baby taught us the first lesson. No one survives alone. Today, humans give birth more safely than at any point in history. Modern medicine solved what our ancestors couldn't: infection, complications, labor that used to end in tragedy. That is one of humanity's greatest achievements. But something changed. For hundreds of thousands of years, birth was protected by two systems. One was the human body. The other was the human group. Modern medicine transformed the first problem, but it did not replace the second system, the old village. For most of human history, a new mother was surrounded by people who already knew what she was going through. An older woman who had done this before, a sister who could take the baby for an hour, a neighbor who brought food without being asked. Support was not something a mother had to search for. It was simply where she lived. Today, many parents enter the hardest months of their lives with more technology than any generation before them. But fewer people standing beside them. A hospital can monitor a heartbeat. A machine can detect danger. But no machine can replace someone sitting beside you at 3 a.m. saying, "I know, I've been there." We like to think civilization is what made us better humans. The cities, the hospitals, the systems. But look back at that ancient circle for a second. The woman in labor and the people gathering around her, moving closer instead of stepping away. For hundreds of thousands of years, this was how humans faced the hardest moments of life. That's not really a story about birth. That's the moment our species decided what kind of animal we were going to be. Our ancestors didn't have stronger bodies than we do. They had a crowd gathered around whoever was struggling, refusing to leave. Somewhere inside you, that same instinct is still running the flinch when you hear someone cry, the pull to step in before you've even decided to. When a new parent feels overwhelmed in a quiet room at 3 a.m., that isn't personal failure. That is 200,000 years of human biology screaming for a village that isn't there anymore. We didn't survive because we stopped being fragile. We survived because we stopped being fragile alone.